Yes, the sun is just roaring on. We've been blessed for the last couple of weeks that we've gotten some good rain for the garden. Saved us a lot of time in watering, and the plants are enjoying it. The tomatoes are just going crazy. If anybody needs any extra tomato plants and wants to drop by, we'll gladly dig up a few good hearty ones and pass them on. We got more volunteers than we can handle. In any event, delighted that you're here and that we get to take this conversation to fill the next level of what first century Aramaic forgiveness looks like. And Ms. Jean, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
No, I did forward you an email that I had gotten, but there's nobody with a hand up or no questions in the chat room.
Okay, cool. Well, I've got a couple of questions in from that email. And the first one is asking about the Course in Miracles and the woman who scribed the Course in Miracles. The question is, that she seemed to go in a very different direction for some reason towards the end of her life. And my understanding, and I don't have direct knowledge, there is a book called Return to Felicity that I think talks more about what Helen's life was like. Helen was a very intellectual, what word could I use? She was an intellectual atheist psychologist. And actually when there was a conflict with her boss at work. She worked at Columbia University as a medical researcher, psychological researcher. And she and her boss had a big fight. And she went to him at the end of the day and said, there's got to be a better way. And the story goes that she got home and a voice in her head said, sit down. I want you to take dictation. This is A Course in Miracles. And Helen was a devout atheist. And when she went to work the next day, she went to the boss who she had the conflict with and said, am I going crazy? Like, why, what's going on here? And she told him a little bit about what she'd written, showed it to him. And he said, that makes sense to me, and I'll help you with it. So he became he wasn't a scribe as such, but he became, I guess, a consultant, worked with her in getting it all recorded. And my understanding is that throughout the whole scribing of the course, she more than one time said, I don't believe this. This is crazy. I don't believe it. But she scribed, 1,200 pages, whatever it was. So that's my best understanding. And as I say, I think the book Return to Felicity tells more about it. There are probably some videos on the internet that would work in that direction too. And then Laws of Living. Was that inspired by the Course in Miracles, or is it separate? Totally, completely, 1,000% separate from the Course in Miracles. It came totally and completely, strictly out of the first century Aramaic translations from the Kabbalist manuscript. There was a Superior Court judge, Judge Asa D. Kelly, in Albany, Georgia. Actually, he was originally the director of prisons. And he went to the gentleman who was my partner for several years, who's now passed, Googled, and asked him if he could come up with something that could change prisoners' minds and rehabilitate them. And out of that came a course called Emotional Maturity Instruction. At the same time as Dan was doing that, I was working on doing course material and doing workshops and lectures on a thing that I called Lessons in Living. And there's actually a program still going on at Unity in Delray Beach. There's a kindergarten to grade 8 school there. And myself and 2 other people started that Lessons in Living course. And as I was doing that, Dan and I were putting together our work, what he had done with EMI and what I'd done with Lessons in Living and the work I developed. And the result of that was Laws of Living. We cut recidivism in the prisons by over 90%. In Albany, Georgia, the sheriff got rid of it because his jail was empty. And the way that a sheriff who owns a jail gets his jail paid for is basically a per diem rate from the state. You got to have somebody in the jail. So the incentive is not exactly to empty the jails. And so the sheriff actually got rid of laws of living. So that's how laws of living came together. And yes, I'm with you totally, Sean, on the challenge of getting people to shift their minds. Sean had written, that he's run into challenges of getting people to begin to move in the direction of a deeper level of understanding. In fact, he says, I experienced that Yeshua really had a hard time when speaking with the backward illiterate fishermen and farmers. He finally said, wait for the Holy Spirit, wait for Ruka-Dukucha, wait till you know how to breathe. And he got up out of there, LOL. So, yeah, I think, Sean, when we, the physicist Yeshua said a little leavening leavens the whole loaf. And he was not talking about bread. He was talking about physics. He was talking about creating a strong enough energetic field that energetic field would inculcate all minds. And being of a higher energy, a higher vibration, would tend to overcome, would tend to dissolve the lower. As soon as one starts to tap into the level of being or the level of truth, that presence of love, in the physical world, water is the master solvent. The mountains wear away. It may take millions of years, but the mountains wear away if the water keeps, where did the Grand Canyon come from? The flow of water. Well, the flow of active present love in the mind, once one opens their mind to that, the hostility and fear-based mind, no matter how many generations it's been around, begins to dissolve, begins to disappear. And so that's ultimately what I take as the critical mass he was talking about. That when enough minds return to functioning out of and being fueled by the active presence of love, then the hostility and fear-based content in the mind simply begins to dissipate, begins to disappear. That would be my take on that one. And then speaking of, you mentioned that he talks about the fact that I mentioned patents and that several people around the planet come up with literally patented an idea that has never been seen on the planet before, and 2 or 3 or 4 different people in different countries patented, within hours of each other. How does that happen? And the question is, does a person put out a signal like a thought and hits others with the same ideas? Or does the spirit put out a signal and it happens that a few are able to be tuned to it? I don't know, Sean, whether we could make a definitive statement about that. I think that if one of the things we talk about in laws of living is that a condition in one mind, because everything is energy, and energy by definition is motion, and everything that moves creates an energy wave. And so a condition in one mind will set up a field that will tend to resonate that condition in another mind, unless that other mind is fully conscious and committed to whatever it is that's moving within them. And so I can easily see that someone comes up with a new idea. I was just talking to a friend this morning. He was telling me about how yesterday and today again, he woke up and there was a song in his mind and he wrote the song. And many songwriters have said that. So do these energetic patterns exist at another level of energy, and are we just tapping into them? I suspect that's probably the explanation, that these energetic patterns are there and available, and anyone who's able to attune to them can literally, just like tuning your radio to a certain station, will pick up that frequency. And I could easily imagine that if one person comes up with a thought, then one of the lessons in the Course in Miracles says there are no private thoughts. Literally everything you think sets up an energy wave, and therefore becomes available to anyone who's attuned to that wave. So I could easily imagine that one person could receive that input. If we look at the upward climb from the single cell, we look at the upward climb from the simplest elements, and we see higher and higher and higher states of organization. Is there a power, which one would call the creator, who already has a plan of completion in mind and is building instruments with which to receive and execute that plan? That makes sense to me. In fact, I could easily see another possibility, and that is the creator, being in charge of all of creation, has set the scene and created all of these forms of expression, each one with a perceptual system that matches what it's designed for. And we don't know of one creature on the planet, aside from man, that can adjust or change its own perceptual system and move into other realms. We can see creatures that adapt to circumstances. I used the example a couple of weeks ago of the fox or the wolf has a den on the side of the river and gets an intuitive hit that, it's storming, the river's going to rise, and my offspring in the den are in trouble, and we'll move them. But I don't see that as an ability to originate something new. I see that as a guidance system, and the wolf or the fox moves its den and its young further up to high ground. But we don't see, and so it can certainly adapt to the energetic signals that the universe sends. Gee, there's a flood coming. Get your babies out of the den. But we don't see a wolf or a fox. We've never observed this. Get that hit that the river's going to rise and say, well, I think what I'll do is I'll go and make myself some sandbags and get a shovel together and start shoveling sand into these bags and create a dam around my den so that my babies are safe. We don't see that. We don't see the ability to adapt that perceptual system that I know of. Now, maybe somebody is aware of it, and if so, I'd love to be aware of it. I'd love to be made aware of it. But we don't see one that can change the whole perceptual system and originate something new. Is the something new in the ethers waiting to be expressed? I could easily see that would be so. And or perhaps we are able to totally and completely originate something new. I don't know that I'd make a commitment on one side or the other, that I could see where both sides of that could be an accurate expression of what's going on. And then you're talking about increasing abilities in the last paragraph. The whole focus of the quantum still point is to bring our antenna, and I look at, from my original work back in the electronics world and then going into the medical world, and I look at the way that energy systems work. I've got a radio over there, and it needs electricity in order to operate. Without electricity, it's dead. It doesn't work. And you and I need fuel. We need to eat, drink water, be hydrated, those sorts of things in order to function. But then to really fulfill its role, the radio needs to have a tuning mechanism, an antenna, that brings a signal in that expresses through the radio. So my take is, with a background in electronics, is that the bony structure of the head, the spine, and the pelvis are literally an antenna. Now imagine that you have a $10,000 stereo system that is just the most updated FM receiver, the highest technology of speakers, it's just an amazing system. But if I go in there and pull that antenna out, you're not going to get one note of music out of that radio system. If I go in there and mangle the antenna so that it does not function to resonate with any of the radio stations that are being locally broadcast, then I'm not going to hear one newscast. I'm not going to hear one program of entertainment. I'm not going to hear anything out of that radio. Well, yes, we eat in order to fuel this system, but my take is that in order to operate as human beings, we need an antenna. We're told in the ancient scriptures, in the Creator's energy field, in Him we live, move, and have our being. And if you have two energy fields that are in tune or in harmony with each other, in resonance with each other, then there's going to be an exchange of information. The only way that I can imagine, with my background in the world of physics and electronics, the only way that I could imagine receiving information is having an antenna of some sort. And if the antenna is mangled, then there's trouble. Signal isn't going to come through properly. My take is, from both my medical training and my electronics training, is that the bony structure, particularly the fine bones of the head, the spine, and the pelvis, are literally an antenna system. And that antenna system, most people think when the baby's soft spot hardens that the antenna is fixed, but it's not. Your whole structure, unless it's been physically or emotionally traumatized or chemically traumatized, is literally in a state of continuous motion. Very subtle, very small range of motion, maybe a millimeter or two. And one of the things we know is that the shape of an antenna determines the frequencies it receives. So if I'm up in Buffalo, New York, and I'm watching TV, I've got channel 2, channel 3, channel 5, channel 7, whatever. I have an antenna on the roof. Of course, this is dating things. Not many homes with antennas on them anymore, but in the time when we did have that technology, I had to have the right shape antenna. If I got a perfect 2, 3, 5, and 7 signal in Buffalo and I brought that antenna down here, I probably wouldn't be watching much television, or at least not watching it very comfortably, because there are different conditions and different frequencies that local broadcast stations work on. Or if I were up in Buffalo, New York with that antenna on my roof and I'm watching channel 2, and someone gets up on the roof and turns the antenna backward and bends all the arms in the antenna, I'm not going to be watching it for very long. The picture's going to get snowy. There's going to be less of an interchange of energy. There has to be an exchange of information through resonance that puts into the antenna, whether it's on the radio or the TV, puts information in that is at the right frequency that the receiver can decode and express. My take is that the bony structure of our bodies are designed as that antenna. And being in one shape, there are two different states aside from the range of motion. One of them is called flexion. One of them is called extension. When the bony structure of the human form is in flexion, it is one shape. When it's in extension, it's a totally, completely different shape. and everything in between. So my take is it is a continuously moving, self-adjusting antenna that if it's been physically or emotionally traumatized or verbally traumatized, that is, traumatized by one's own voice engaging in the energies of hostility, fear, rage, and such, then the structure is imbued with those frequencies. And when the antenna, the same as the guy who went up on the roof and bent all the arms and turned it backward, when the antenna has been traumatized, you know, the child was dropped on their head when they were 2, and nobody ever restored the antenna structure, there's going to be trouble within the structure because there are going to be frequencies that are missing. Energetic patterns that don't belong in the system are going to enter into the system and create disturbance. And energetic patterns that should be coming in from resonance, you know, the ancient scriptures talks about the creator and says, in him, not necessarily meaning anything about males, but in this energy field of the creator, we live, move, and have our being. Moving at about 7,000 miles through space. If we're made of the same stuff, creator stuff, there's an ongoing, or there's supposed to be, an ongoing exchange of information. If the antenna isn't moving through its proper range of motion, if it's locked up, then one is going to have difficulty attuning to what they're designed to attune to. And so actually the quantum still point, the 3-day personal intensive that I'm doing, basically I've pulled out all of the training over the last 50 years, and some of it training that or work that I wouldn't introduce in a regular intensive because people just aren't ready for it. But the whole point of that 3-day quantum still point is to bring the antenna into alignment on a physiological level while removing the satanic influences, remembering that in Aramaic the word Satan has got nothing to do with this Greek monstrosity that the terror merchants came up with, but rather in Aramaic the word Satan simply means the resistor, one who misleads. You can watch the operation of Satan in just about anybody on the planet. Just watch them in upset, listen to the conversation that they're having about somebody else, and point out that what they're dealing with is their own. And you will watch invariably that people will fulfill the definition of Satan. And in Aramaic, Satan means the resistor. You watch that person who you hear whining and complaining about, why is this happening to me again? And you say, gee, you know, I heard you whining and complaining about this 20 years ago, and here you are still doing it. Has it ever occurred to you that this is about you? And watch the denial. No, wait a minute. This has got nothing to do with me, and watch them hold their breath. That's called resistance. That's the first half of the definition of Satan. And then the other half of the definition is one who misleads. Once they tell you about how the thing that they're engaged in again and again and again has nothing to do with them, then listen to the whole story they've got about somebody else, the mislead. And it's all somebody else's fault. The classic definition of denial. And so undoing that denial, restoring or becoming aware of where physiological resistance is a part of the quantum still point. That's part of the training over the 3 days. It's a very multi-sensory experience of one tapping into and learning to let go of resistance on a physiological level, becoming aware of where that resistance is, and using the breath to move through and dissolve the blocks, and restoring the proper range of motion of the antenna so that it brings in that which it was designed to bring in. And at the same time, when the antenna is out of alignment, the whole system can hold on to energies that it has incorrectly attuned to And holding on to those energies is what we call the disease process. And so reversing that disease process, going into ease, softness, and letting the energy that wants to move through the system move, and then restoring the proper range of motion to the antenna is the essence of quantum still point. So yes, that all fits within the process. And that's where we go with quantum still point. So I hope that kind of gets to your thoughts there. And I hope one of these days that we're going to be able to sync up and be able to have a conversation on the show about some of these questions, because I think we'd probably go to deeper levels if we had the space to do that. So holding the space that for when it's time.
And you have a hand up.
Great. Let's say hello.
It is Dusty, area code 904. You're on the air.
Well, aloha, kids. I hope everybody's well.
Hey, we're rocking. I was just telling people about our conversation about how you receive your music. You want to share that with us a little bit?
Yeah, but I want to say that as a licensed RF engineer, my favorite part of every part of it, of all of it, was antenna systems, and everything you said was, as an analogy, was so right on, and I loved hearing someone use this stuff correctly, and I thought I'd throw in that the way to know an antenna system's tuned or not is by the standing waves that come back. In other words, you want all the energy to go out if you're transmitting, and if any waves come back, the signal is diminished or chaos, and then disease or whatever you want to call it. And so I thoroughly enjoyed that. And yes. So what was that question about music?
Well, I had started, a question had come up right at the beginning. Someone had written and in answering that, I shared the conversation we had just before the show about you waking up with a whole song in your head and putting it down. The question was about, are we being fed this stuff by spirit, or are we just making it up? What's the story? So I shared that a little bit.
Right. And the more you know, the more you know you don't know, and it's one of those things where I believe that what I'm doing, I'm in the process of accessing old memories and things that been buried deep in there, and most of the things that come up are little tunes from when I was, a preteen or something like that, and all of a sudden, I'll take that basic melody, and as I wake up, the words come to it, and it's maybe about my little sister, something endearing that makes sense to her and maybe her alone, and it's usually funny, and I'm surprised that I yesterday morning it just popped into my head as I was dialing the phone in that case, and the whole thing, and I sang it to her, and she liked it so much she wanted a recording, and it's a good thing I did, because a little later I forgot one of the key words. So where these things come from, wow, it's a big universe, and I'm hoping that there's a wonderful angelic conspiracy going on, and it's all about beauty.
Well, according to Yeshua, there is a feminine elemental force in each of us that, by definition, number one, will, when invited, undo the effects of our errors, and two, teach us the truth. And I would interpret that as give us whatever information we need to move forward in the next step in our world. So fits perfectly to me.
Yes, and I invoke her and or her affiliates, shall we say, throughout the day, just to keep myself going through a time of particular crisis here. And I even kind of have this little thing I do that's like an antenna that's just part of a structural thing. And you know, that Caboris manuscript that you sent me has really had a wonderful impact, because
awesome.
I love learning, but I want to learn a more fine-tuned truth than I knew before. And I have a question about in the forgiveness process, shebag. In the Caboris, it just says more or less. It does say removed. It does say canceled, something like that. No, it doesn't say removed. It's just canceled, forgiven. But you use the word removed a lot, and I love the word removed. And I have since I use it a lot. I try it on in different scenarios, and I wonder how and why you came up with that word, and if you would just kind of rattle on for a little bit on that, please.
Yes. I don't know how early you were on the show, but were you on when I talked about how water is the universal solvent and carved the Grand Canyon?
Yep.
Okay. So my take would be this. So canceling the goal is how the forgiveness process is initiated. It is not the whole forgiveness process. It's the Course in Miracles actually talks about it as our part. In fact, I used this quote yesterday from the Course. And it says, your part is to return your mind to the point at which the original offense occurred. And how do you do that? Here I am in a state of denial. I've dissociated from everything to do with this issue in my life. That's why my mind keeps telling me it's all about somebody else. So, and psychiatry invented this thing is go lay on the couch for 20 years and see if you can find the deep, dark, dirty thing that happened to you. And that would be, in a sense, that would be returning your mind to the point at which the original offense occurred. Yeshua has a much more immediate approach. He understands that perception is the utilization of a very small piece of content of your mind, driven by goals in order to produce the world that you see, the world of perception, a fabrication made up of a tiny, tiny bit of data compared to what is contained in the actuality. And so shebag, which has been translated as forgive, correctly translates to cancel. So when I'm in a situation where I have upset going on, and if you look at the reality management worksheet, what do I do before I go into the core of the forgiveness process? I identify what's going on. I look at the goal that I hold for the situation. I then bring love present to my mind. Then I cancel the goal. When I cancel the goal, shebag the goal, then the construct of my mind. Go ahead.
Would you back up and do you have had a 1, 2, 3 process? Would you do that part again, please? I mean, just a sentence.
In step 1, I'm identifying the situation. I start out identifying who I am, identify what my emotion is. I take responsibility for and look at the thought behind the emotion. I look at what punishment's going on. So I'm now aware of the whole situation, the whole construct of my mind. And then I start to move in the direction of what am I going to do with this? Well, first of all, whatever's in me that I'm not in touch with, I'm willing to move through it. So the step 2 is I'm willing to go through the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of healing.
And and that's the part where, that's important.
So I'm willing.
Gotcha.
So I just got out the cosmic grease and lathered myself up. Step 3, looking back at the whole situation. Step 1, I identify the goal I hold for whoever I'm blaming at this moment, whoever I'm laying this on. It might be a goal for myself. It might be a goal for someone else. Then in step 4, I invite love to be present. I tap into, I breathe, and I go to the most powerful place in me that brings love presence into my structure. And then in step 5, I initiate the forgiveness process. I do my part. I cancel the goal for whoever I'm blaming here to do whatever it is I want them to do. Having canceled that goal, the construct of my mind collapses. When it collapses in on its own footprint, which means that which a moment ago which was unconscious and driving this perceptual pain that helped me believe it's everybody else's fault collapses in on itself, and now I get to look at the unconscious part of my own mind underneath this whole construct that I've created. Am I making sense so far?
Yeah, I haven't heard the word removed so far, but yes, I'm following you. It makes good sense.
This is the
We're
setup.
not there. Okay.
Yeah, we're not there yet. Then in step 5B, I realized that underlying this construct of rage or sadness or grief, whatever it is, when I think back and I go, oh yeah, I remember my dad raging like, oh, I remember my grandfather, oh yeah, I remember my great-grandmother, she used to rage like that. Man, this has been going on for a long damn time. It's just like a mountain. How am I ever going to get rid of this? Doing that in my own pea brain, which is capable of processing 9 bits of data at a time, it's never going to happen. So now I invite Rukudakudsha, the super processor. Yeah. By definition, she undoes the effects of my errors. There's where the removal part goes.
Gotcha.
Remember, I've got this mountain, this unconscious mountain that's taken 1,000 generations to develop. I only see the tip of the mountain, and I know I'm angry with George for what he did, and it must be all George's fault. But if I've gone through step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5A, I canceled my need for George to do what he said he was going to do. Now my whole perceptual construct collapses into my unconscious, where the mountain is. And I've invited love, Rukudakudsha, to move the mountain. And just like the water poured through the Grand Canyon for how long to carve out the Grand Canyon, active present love is the solvent for trauma in the human system. So I've invited that love to move in me and begin to dissolve, remove, transmute the unconscious content that's probably been going on for 1,000 generations.
I get it, and I love that. And I have to say that, again, you're used on the show, as you always do, use the word love. And, you know, sometimes I've gone through most of those steps and kind of didn't quite get to the point where I was feeling Ruka. I was feeling the love. And that's a good reminder. I appreciate it.
Well, you know, when you go to that space, a good step can be to take the time to tap into what is it that brings the clearest experience of the presence of love into view in this moment. And I still use, when I do the process, I still use the point 43 years ago when my daughter delivered into my hands in our home on Breckenridge Road Breckenridge, was it Breckenridge? No, Rickenbacker Road in Atlanta. That's where my house was. You remember up on Rickenbacker after I went and got married and got my own home.
Right.
And my daughter delivered. She opened her eyes. and did something that the medical community says isn't possible, and that is absolutely laser focused into my eyes. And she grinned at me.
Oh my goodness.
And that put me into a state that I had never experienced before, and that was a state of absolutely no mind. I could not think a thought. The presence of love was so overwhelming. Actually, the kind of the metaphor that I came up with in talking about it later, after I sort of taught my mind how to talk about it was like my brain and my tongue were buttered. I could not think a thought. This all happened at 4:40 in the afternoon on a Friday afternoon. And I know that because in my home there, I don't know if you were ever at my home where I had a classroom on Rickenbacker, but I had a classroom there, and there were people coming from all over the Southeast, and that was before cell phones. So I couldn't call and say at 3:40 in the afternoon when we realized it that my wife was in labor. I couldn't call anybody and say, we're canceling this weekend class. And in particular, there's a fellow who was driving up from Miami to Atlanta for the class. And so at 3:40, we realized she was in labor. At 4:40, this happened. Her head is in my hands. She grins at me. I am absolutely out of my mind. I have no mental function whatsoever. I cannot think a thought. And at 7 o'clock, I had a baby in my arms and welcomed people into the house to go downstairs to the classroom for me to teach my class. And they're looking at me like, no, you're kidding. No, she wasn't just born 2.5 hours ago. No, that can't. Yeah, that's the way it works. And I went down to teach, and I could not think a thought. I actually stopped the classroom almost in tears, and I went up and got a tape recorder and recorded the class because I was like, I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. It's like direct transmission. There's no mental process happening in here. There was just that flowing presence of active life. So that's what I go to when I do the worksheet.
I hear you, and that's a powerful.
And you're welcome to that experience if you need one.
No, yeah, that's a great story, and I have had those. I've had it wasn't a baby being born, but yes, where like all the rivets and the joints and seams and all those kind of things just kind of melt away, and you're just a homogeneous, glowing piece of material in the universe. Yes. Well, that's great. Yeah, I love it.
So that's what I do when I'm doing a worksheet to call forward that presence of love. And that's the master solvent, my best understanding now after all these years, that's the master solvent of all trauma. Anyone who will spend time in that energy, they will be alleviated over time of all hostility and fear and even the capacity to generate that.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. That's
where the removal piece comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, that was not 25 words or less, but I loved it all. And thank you so much. I'm going to listen, but I need to go for now. And
all right, you have a blessed one.
Okay, and you too, and all.
Bye-bye. All right, parachute. All right. Well, that was Dusty. Dusty is a friend that actually you've heard Patrick McGann come on the show on occasion, fellow naturopath. That was my first massage therapist way back 50 years ago in Atlanta. And we've been hanging out ever since. Actually, if you're familiar with Atlanta, there was a right near Farr Road and Ivy Road, there was a huge white 2-story house, and Dusty and Patrick and myself and Patrick's wife shared that house in the early days when I first got to Atlanta. And so it's nice to still be hanging out with these two guys.
Patrick's actually on the switchboard.
Oh, really? Well, let's say hello to Patrick. It's cool to be hanging out with these two guys still 50 years later. Pretty sweet. Hey there, Patrick. How do you do?
Be good. Did you hear me laughing? I'm good.
I got
it. Really good to hear, Dusty. And it was really good to hear that I need to get, that'll be on the website. That formula you gave out, right? I need to practice.
It'll be on the archives of the show, yeah.
Okay. I do it.
It was in essence a short form of the workshop. Why is this happening to me again?
Yeah, it's like I was always, what would I say? One of my biggest problems has always been that I want to go fast, and I want it easy, and I want it quick. So I always worked on trying to memorize everything that you did to be able to do it in my head instead of on a worksheet. And I figured, well, if I'm doing a worksheet, if it's something to make me pass out, I'll write it down so I can get back to it. But otherwise, let's just get it done while I'm walking around, driving, whatever. So I finally got down to the point where I just said, okay, I'm judging. I'm going to release the judgment of myself and others. Any judgment I have for anyone else, I have that same judgment for myself. I'm just going to grab a new viewpoint and look at it a different way. Sometimes I would get, some empathy for the other person if they were, somebody who, like the guy that sold us the bad washing machine and dryer that we had to go out and do laundry for, 3 months, and he kept saying he was going to send people to fix it. Found out he was he was a scammer who went to jail for it, and all he did was buy used, broken machines, shine them up. A girl shined them up, and then he'd sell them, and then people would get one. And it wasn't just me. The worst case was 2 women had kids, and they spent all their money to get stoves, laundry stuff, and they were out of money. And they not only had to go do their laundry somewhere, they couldn't cook. It's like, so I had to study a lot of things to get my first set of empathy for the poor guy. But he couldn't help himself. He had altered brain structure. Has no way he's ever going to stop. He went back to jail eventually, but that was one that took a while.
Well, my offering
point and just see the good. But this formula that you just gave me, I've been bypassing it for 2 or 3 years anyway. So I noticed that it would really help me in a lot of ways. The majority of the time, I can just get a new viewpoint, change my mind real quickly now. But I need some certain things. I really need the exact, precise way that you just structured it. And I was just amazed at what you had accomplished over these years. The other thing I felt was that if I do it that way, I'm going to be helping other people. They didn't do, 20, 30, 40 years like I have, releasing my judgment and having a new viewpoint. So I think that other people are in a lot of trouble, just about everybody I know. And I know a couple of people that are right, but because I wasn't doing it the way you structured it, they can't get the help they need. So I will get that down and share it. Thank you.
Cool. Well, one of the things that I suggest and what I've observed in myself and in others is that when one does it in their heads, I actually have a song I usually sing to people who say, well, I just do the process in my head. And
right.
The song goes like this: slip sliding away. The nearer your destination, the more you slip sliding away. When we get close, one of the games the mind plays is I'm going to find a way to go the other direction. And what I've noticed is, again, in my own process and with working with people, is that when you write it down, you catch things that otherwise your mind just glides over top of. And when you catch those things that the mind glides over top of, you oftentimes, out of one worksheet, like I've found over the years, on average, I would say that every worksheet that I've done over the years has led me to, because I'm paying attention to my subtlest thoughts, has led me into an average of at least 4 additional worksheets. because here I am, I'm writing this thought down after I've canceled my goal, and then all of a sudden I notice something that I realized that normally I would just turn my head the other way and forget that. But doing it in writing, it takes you to a different depth. So I'll just put that out.
Okay, I got something to answer on that right away. Now, the majority of the things that I've dealt with, yes, I was able to do in my head, driving around in a car. But anything that has to do strong or important, a strong relationship, an important thing, and a repeat pattern, yeah, what I do is I go in. Now, it's been difficult because my hands are structured. I can still do really deep work, but they don't write. And they don't type. I only have two-finger typing now. It used to be a touch typer, non-visual, no problem. But now they don't like that. But here's the solution. And I've been doing this lately, and I didn't do it with worksheets, but I've done it with the forgiveness process already, and it's wonderful. So on my search the web, where it says Microsoft Start on, and it has a little magnifying glass on the right, it says, I'm touching it now, Copilot, your everyday AI companion. That's really nice for any kind of research I want to do, and I can get it faster than anything. But the other thing I have that's even more important on Windows 11 and thereafter is you touch Windows and H, and you can, I don't have to type anymore. I can sit and put out thoughts and thoughts and thoughts and structures and thoughts and thoughts and keep on going and keep on going, and then I can reread it, and then I can do it again and again and again.
Yeah.
It's no effort.
Powerful.
So nobody, including me, has an excuse anymore as long as you have Windows 11 or thereafter. Windows 10 might do it, I don't know, but that typing with Windows and H is a shortcut on the keyboard, and it's just changed my life dramatically. And I can do.
You can do the same thing on your phone. Do the same thing on your phone. Just hit the microphone and talk.
I'll go talk to Chris about it. My phone's not working like my computer is on certain things. But I like to see it. I like to sit in my ergonomic balance position, and I like to lay back behind that and relax, and then go to balance. Whenever I resolve things, I don't want to be looking at a phone. We usually look to the phone left or right, and eventually everybody I've been working with that's older, 40 plus, has a large amount of muscle on the right base of their necks. And I think that the phones, unless you hold them centered and up, are very detrimental. You do it, but I don't know anybody else that does. And I like looking up. Also, there was a thing in the Bible. Okay. There's a thing in the Bible that says, I look up into the hills from whence cometh my help. Now, I find that dead center is what most people need on a computer, but what I do is I put it a little bit higher than that, and I find that when my chin lifts a hair or my eyes go up above center, that the help comes in. It's even more phenomenal. It's like going back and forth between center balance, and it's still on center balance, but it seems to step it up higher as far as being connected to the all and having information available to you, and being creative and having new thought. So I can get it out, in any position I want to be in, because your body wants to dictate. Your emotions dictate a lot of vast majority of structure in the body. I've divided it now in my teaching and learning to ergonomic posturing and emotional posturing. So if you're unconscious, and I look at people every day that are unconscious and going through, why is this happening to me again? And they look like crap, and I still have a whole lot of crap my body does, and it's just like, so to get free, I'd love to go to center. But when I'm going to work on something, that's great. It's always been great, but that little bit of lift of looking just slightly up just seems to make a major difference. But anybody can play with it. Just be real subtle back and forth on the cranium to the atlas.
Cool.
Oh yeah, I'm just going to put this for people that don't know it. Here's the whole thing. Get support of a chair till you're totally comfortable. But make sure that you have your shoulders under your neck. So you just need that base. Comfort in the chair, tons of different adjustments. Most people can't adjust their chairs in all the business I go to every day. Their chairs are all wrong. They don't know how to adjust them. They have ergonomic chairs and ergonomic, equipment. I was at the bank, 2 banks yesterday. Everything was wrong. Chairs were adjusted wrong. Computer screens that were dynamically movable were wrong. And we
definitely the shape of the antenna is important.
Yeah, totally changed 2 people's lives and just kidding around and helping them out for 10 minutes. And now they can apply it to their car and everywhere they go to sit down or anywhere they stand, they can play with it, so they were very thankful. It only took 10 minutes to learn, but that was it, like adjust the chair, find out all the controls, find out what you can do with a computer screen, move everything as close to your center as possible. Don't reach out for the computer. Bring the keyboard to where you don't have to reach it out. Don't reach out for your steering wheel. Bring it towards you, etc. So that's the center-to-center ergonomic. And then the emotional posturing, I think, is the only way you're going to take care of it is through forgiveness, period, over and out. Otherwise, it's like...
Gotta clean out what doesn't belong.
If wherever a body doesn't express its emotions by, inhibiting and withholding, the body gets tight and stiff. And that's what Dr. Sarno, you can talk about. I'm going to stop talking now, but I will say one story. Sarno said he wouldn't do surgery anymore because it was rage in people's back. Real quickly, when I started doing body work in Atlanta, one of my clients was head lady for. She wasn't a physical therapist, but she ran the clinic with 5 PhD level physical therapists at the Atlanta Back Clinic and the hospital, and people were flying in from around the country. They weren't getting results. So all I did was show them how to go slow motion, non-force technique in slow motion, not trying to make something happen, but allowing it. And next thing I know, the psychologist, who had no business whatsoever, came to my clinic and said, "Pastor, thank you so much. My practice is full," which proves out there's a lot of rage in the stiffness and the tightening, especially in the spine.
Yeah.
So I'm finished.
Well, we're down to the last minute or so, but I'll just close out the show by sharing that Patrick does a process called centerline balancing, and way back in the early days, 20 or more years ago, I was actually in Florida, and Patrick put me through a centerline balancing session, like what he's talking about he did in the banks and such. And I went to speak that evening at a workshop, and my mind was the clearest, the sharpest, the most functional it had ever been by just aligning my structure. Definitely a lot to do with it, and you watch how people shut down their breath, shut down their head, shut down their neck, close down their shoulders, protect their heart, tighten their pelvis, tighten their feet, tighten their buttocks, and now you've got a perfect formula for death. And what's the death about? It's locked in whatever energetic patterns aren't being forgiven. So I'm with you, Patrick, on being able to align, to open the structure, to be able to let go of what doesn't belong. Definitely important. In the meantime, we're complete. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world.